So for the first day, we looked at the basics of Israeli history. And on the second day, we're going to go into more detail about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the historical context of that conflict. And there are two big arguments I want you to think about throughout this class. Number one, based on historical evidence, who has a better claim to the land, Israel or Palestine? And the second argument I want you to think about, do you feel the two-state solution is the right course of action or not? So think about those two things throughout this class. Now, the question you might be even asking out of the gates is, what's the point? Why should me, an American kid, even give a hoot about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict? Well, many injuries and deaths have resulted from this conflict over land and religion over many years, and the violence continues today. Also, America's relationship with Israel has a major role in geopolitics, whether you think it's good or bad. That's your opinion, but it is a major role regardless of how you think about this, okay? And to be a little more forthright with you, some people in the world aren't happy with this relationship. And until this problem is solved, terrorist groups continue to use it as a rallying cry against the West, including the United States, okay? And a lot of ugliness has happened over this, okay? So let me start with a personal connection, because I have been to Israel. It was a life-changing trip, and I don't want to turn this into, me, but I think a first-hand perspective can kind of shed some light about the nation. So also, me, you, all of us have biases, okay? We have connections, we have biases, and you have to acknowledge them before you are objective, okay? So just take a second, what's in your head, and try to be open-minded, try to be unbiased and objective when you learn about this. So here's a quick overview of my trip to Israel. Now, I'm going to start with Jerusalem because it might be the most important city on earth. It is a holy place to Christians, Muslims, and Jews. And you can see the gates of Jerusalem, just how large they are. That's my wife and daughter next to the wall. And you can see bullet holes in the wall, which is a telltale sign of the tumultuous history of the city. So all those holes, those are not woodpeckers, those are bullets. Yep, good times, good times. All right, so let me start with the four quarters of Jerusalem. And as I said a second ago, it's a holy place to the Abrahamic religions. And I actually have my pictures based in the order of how the city is. There's the Christian quarter, and here's me in the Christian quarter, and you can see Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. Here's me in the Muslim quarter, and you can see a Muslim woman just walking about, having her day. This is the Armenian quarter, and you can see the cross, and it's a memorial to the Armenian genocide. And here's my family and I in the Jewish quarter, and there's some Jewish guy just going about his day as well. And it's an amazing place to travel to, because just as you walk through the city, you'll hear the call to prayer, then you will see, rabbis, and then you will see priests. And it's very amazing how these people coexist in a small area. And here's a map to, reiterate my point. The Christian quarter, the Armenian quarter, the Jewish quarter, and the Muslim quarter. Now, when you look at the map of Jerusalem, there are more sacred and holy places than you can see in a day. I mean, all of these red letters are important to people, okay? So the west is Israeli, essentially, and the eastern portion is Arabic with Israeli settlement. So there's a little bit of a microcosm of Israel itself, okay? Now, in terms of geography, as a nation, you can go from the most northern part to the most southern part in 7 hours. So in your travels, here's the Judean desert. That's a straight-up desert with camels and Bedouins and the whole nine. Here's us in the Golan Heights. It looks like Colorado or Montana. Absolutely beautiful. Here's me in Roman ruins. You drive an hour or two, you see Roman ruins. And then you drive another hour or two, and you see palm trees and donkeys. This is a kibbutz in Israel. It's remarkable the variety of geography in such a small area. And major tourist sites, the Dead Sea, the lowest place on earth. And if you get to go there, you go to the Dead Sea and put the mud on your skin. It actually does do good for your skin. That is not a myth. And here's the Wailing Wall, and you see the faithful praying, and you take a prayer and you put it in the crack of the wall. So I took a photograph of my father-in-law's prayer that he put in there. So there's a lot of major tourist sites as well. Okay, so that's my first-hand account. And I only say this because I have been there, therefore I have a bias to what I have seen. And I hope you all get to go there because it's an amazing place. So anyway, on a simple level, where is Israel and Palestine? Very small nation. Again, 7 hours from north to south, and it's smack dab in the Middle East. And you see the Mediterranean Sea here, Egypt here, Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon. It is smack dab in the middle of the action, if you know what I'm saying. So, Palestinian and Israeli propaganda maps. So there are two sides. I'm going to show this to you. So here's the Israeli side, visual proof of the Arab lie about Israeli aggression. So these are all Arabic countries, and if you look at this, Israel's small, looks surrounded by people that don't like them very much. And then if you look at the Palestinian map, they say the whole thing belongs to us. And this propaganda is being pushed by both sides. But again, you have to take propaganda with a grain of salt, right? Okay, so Israelis are multi-ethnic. They're European, they're Middle Eastern, Russian, Ethiopian. And then the Palestinians tend to be Arabic, and they are multi-religious, but primarily Muslim, okay? And why is this land the center of controversy? So anyway, as of now, there are two groups that claim rightful ownership to this territory, and they're called Israelis and Palestinians. And again, Israelis are primarily Jewish, Palestinians are primarily Muslim, and that's the simplistic, dichotomy here between the two sides, okay? Now, many Jews have long claimed the connection to the Holy Land, believing it was promised as a covenant to the ancient Hebrew. This is biblical stuff. This is Old Testament stuff. Now, these Jews believe that despite the fact that they suffered a diaspora, meaning they got kicked out of the motherland, but you keep your culture wherever you travel to, the land of Palestine is ultimately theirs. That's how they see it, and they use the biblical account as the foundation of that belief. Now, despite these historical Jewish claims, many Muslim Palestinians argue the land belongs to them. They've been there for over 1,000 years since the Jewish diaspora. So, moral of the story is both sides have deep, long-term connections to the land, and they argued their points with equal fervor. I think that's safe to say. So here's more of the history. So why did the Jews expect they would receive this homeland? Really, you can trace it to the Balfour Declaration of 1917, which was a statement by the British government that advocated for a creation of Israel. And here's the primary source. His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object. I spared you for my British accent, but in a sense they're saying, okay, well, the Balfour Declaration told us this, okay? Now, why did Jews feel they needed a homeland? Well, anti-Semitism or hatred or dislike of Jews was very, very common in all of these Jewish diaspora destinations, okay? And it goes on a long, long time from the ancient Romans, all the way to 1543. This is a long-term sort of thing, okay? And they also, the obvious, the most extreme act of anti-Semitism was the Holocaust. Now, there's a myth to saying Israel was formed because of the Holocaust. That's not true. However, the Holocaust, over 6 million Jews killed just by being Jewish, just really elucidated this anti-Semitism that was prevalent for centuries, okay? So I don't want you to think this was causation. Don't say Israel was caused by the Holocaust. That's not true. But the Holocaust gave evidence, strong evidence, that people really needed to have a homeland. I think that's safe to say, okay? So in response to these historical connections and events, the United Nations decides, okay, to create a Jewish homeland. So the plot thickens, if you will. So in 1947, Great Britain, which controlled the region, then known as British Palestine, turned the lands over to the UN, and they decided to allow these groups to divide the land between them, which, it sounds fair enough. I have multiple children, and sometimes when they would argue over playing with a particular toy, I'd say, you play with it for a half an hour. You play with it for a half an hour. I think that's kind of common sense. However, I don't know if they saw the inherent conflict that was on the horizon for this, okay? So why did the UN decide to do this? Well, a movement called Zionism became active in Europe in the late 1800s, and Zionism was this desire to create a Jewish homeland. And it gained momentum, and because of this momentum, the UN decided it was the right thing to do. And in this UN partition plan, they divided British Palestine into two states or countries. One would be Arabic, one would be Jewish. Jerusalem would belong to the world, and that's important. That's very, very important because Jerusalem has symbolic meaning to people all over the world, billions of people all over the world. So what were the immediate effects of this partition? Well, Israel declares independence as a new country in 1948 and is immediately attacked by its Arab neighbors. Their Arab neighbors made it real clear how they felt about this. So Palestinians do not recognize Israel and therefore do not declare an Arab country called Palestine. They don't buy into it, okay? Now, what were the consequences of this Arab-Israeli war? Well, Israel successfully defends itself and seizes more territory. Only two disconnected regions, the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, remain unoccupied as future Palestine. And you can see this division here. The green is the Jewish state. The orange is the Arabic state. Now, I have been there, like I said. I will say this. The Israeli land is significantly nicer, significantly more affluent than a very poor, very a lot of concrete and wires, kind of a dark vibe in the Palestinian territory. Okay. So what were the long-term consequences? Well, long-term, Palestinian refugees lose their homes and their land, and Palestinian extremists become furious at Israel. It was supposed to be the Arab country of Palestine. Now, Israelis know that they must defend themselves with military force, and they will not wait to be attacked again, okay? Now, Israel asserts its claims over the city of Jerusalem, and Israeli extremists are easily able to use the war as evidence for the rightness of their cause, okay? Now, going through time a little bit more, 1967, Israel's Arab neighbors plan to annihilate the Jewish state, but Israel strikes first, and they defend those Arab nations. They then occupy the West Bank, Gaza Strip, Sinai Peninsula, and the Golan Heights. This was known as the Six-Day War. Now, Israel maintains control over two of these controversial regions, the West Bank and the Golan Heights. So that's what's going on. And you can see how Israel has morphed through the years, and you can see some people's expressions, how they feel about these changes, okay? So these maps are illustrative, and I'll show you more in class about those. So moving towards the now. Israeli settlements in Palestinians' town in the West Bank. So Israeli settlers see areas as historic Jewish homelands, and they go on in. And Palestinians say, this is just like apartheid. You are taking me over. And each of these numbers are controversial and contentious, okay? They really, really are. And this is a fluid thing. This changes, every month, every year. If I teach this 10 years from now, it's going to be a different state of affairs as it is now. It's a very, very fluid situation. This is not something that's, etched in stone or written in stone way a long time ago. This is a very fluid dynamic here, okay? So back to being in 2000, the gradual turnover of Israeli-occupied areas to Palestine is known as the two-state solution. Now, this plan is collapsing as the killings increase, and the Israeli Defense Forces, or the IDF, reoccupies the West Bank and Gaza. Some would argue it's defending what's rightfully yours, and others say it's a gasoline to a fire kind of thing. And just to simplify, the main issues for the Palestinians: land, the right to return to their homelands as they see their homelands, the end to their settlements, Israeli settlements there, rights to water, economic opportunity, which quite frankly I did not see when I was in Israel. They were much, much poorer than the Israelis. Self-determination to do their own thing, not being told what to do by the Israelis, the end of occupation, and access to Jerusalem, whereas the Israelis, land, security, access to Jerusalem, right to exist. Obviously, I'm reinforcing my point. Jerusalem is really, really important. If you look at demographic data, there's 6 million Israelis, 3.5 million Palestinians, and you can see infant mortality, much worse for Palestinians. Fertility rate, they're having a lot more children than the Israelis, so that kind of is going to be an interesting twist in the future. Israelis will live 8 years longer. Okay, look at the money difference, 19 grand versus $625. Their GDP rate is negative 35%. I'll interpret that, that's poor. Okay, GDP rate for Israelis is pretty steady, and again, primarily Jewish, but there are spatterings of other groups of people. Okay, now here are the arguments I want you to make as we wrap up. Again, now I want you to write, based on the historical evidence, who has a better claim to the land, Israel or Palestine? Back it up with evidence. Just like, because I feel that way. That doesn't cut it. Okay, you're too old, you're too smart to do that. And number two, do you feel the two-state solution is the right course of action or not? Okay, and therein lies the question. Last slide is, what needs to be in your argument? 1, description of both points of view. 2, historical claims to the land from both perspectives, and then your opinion, which one is correct. 3, the viability of the two-state solution in your opinion. And number 4, your opinion on what America's role should be in Israel. So pretty heavy-duty stuff, pretty controversial stuff, but I know you are all capable of hanging with this. So good luck in your writing, and I look forward to reading it, and I appreciate you watching.